They came from all walks of life and achieved a common bond to accomplish their missions. Now they are returned to us to pick up their lives where they left off. They uniquely bear their own hopes for a brighter tomorrow. They together respond to the salutation, "Thank you for your service and welcome home, veteran." Honors Detachment will now post the colors. Commander?
Honor Guard! Loaded! Hoot! Shoulder! Halt! Forward! Halt! Halt! Left! Haze!
Miss Kara Leatherman is with us. She is a middle school student at Rittman, and she is here now to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Kara?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Weapons fell silent at the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, ending the Great War, or the war to end all wars. With the signing of the armistice by the Allied forces in Germany, all fighting ceased. November 11th was known as Armistice Day, and with peace, weapons of war were stacked. In 1954, President Eisenhower changed Armistice Day to Veterans Day. 5555th Honors Detachment will now stack weapons to commemorate this Veterans Day. Rifle team, take your posts and stack your weapons. Let the celebration begin.
Good afternoon. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to the 2013 Veterans Day ceremony at the Ohio Western Reserve National Cemetery. Tomorrow, this nation celebrates Veterans Day. Veterans Day traces its lineage back 95 years to 1918, when the guns fell silent across the battlefields of Europe. Nearly 5 million Americans served in the World War, as it was known then. More than 53,000 Americans did not return. The war was billed as the war to end all wars, but just over 2 decades later, another world war erupted, during which 16 million Americans served, and 300,000 made the ultimate sacrifice to free Europe, Africa, and the Pacific from tyranny. Just 6 years later, nearly 2 million Americans were called to serve in Korea, where 33,000 of their comrades gave their lives to rescue a desperate people from communist aggression. Over 3.4 million men and women served in Vietnam. The names of 58,000 are now listed on a long black wall in the nation's capital, lest we forget the sacrifice they faithfully made. Since Vietnam, Americans have deployed under arms to nearly a dozen troubled lands, including Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, Somalia, Haiti, the Balkans, and the Middle East. 2.4 million Americans have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. More than 5,300 have been killed in action. Over 50,000 have been wounded, and over 1,600 of the wounded have lost an arm or a leg. The veterans who fought the war to end all wars are all gone now. The last, Frank Buckles, died 2 years ago, but over 1 million veterans of the Second World War are still with us, as are about 20 million veterans of all the wars and years since then. That's 22 million living American veterans and 22 million witnesses to both the hard truth that wars still trouble the earth and the proud fact that courageous Americans of every generation still rise up and step forward to fight for freedom when called upon. Thank you, veterans, for all you have done for this nation and for me personally. And thank you all for choosing to spend part of your afternoon with us today. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
It is truly an honor and a privilege to be here. And I am glad to greet and salute my fellow veterans and the staff, the committee members, and all of the guests. I appreciate the fact that you're here on a somewhat inclement day. Abraham Lincoln would have probably phrased it, and in fact did phrase it somewhat like this. He said, "It is altogether fitting and proper that we be here in such a place at such a time." I believe that I would refer also to Douglas MacArthur, who, talking to the Corps of Cadets at West Point, referenced the fact that a soldier, above all, appreciates peace, because he is the one, in fact, who must go out on the fields of combat and defend the peace that we all appreciate and hold dear. When Tom Leatherman called and asked whether I would be willing to speak today, I realized that although I was intimidated, I really felt a deep obligation. And with that obligation goes the understanding that although I'm the one doing the talking, I am talking for every veteran here, and by extension, each of the millions of veterans who have been referenced in the opening remarks. By the way, he also said I could have all the time I want, but in case it's cold and windy, I should limit it to 10 minutes or less. So, what is a veteran? Some years ago, as I prepared to make comments at a Veterans Day high school service, I saw a cartoon. And one of the characters in the cartoon asked the other character, "What's the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day?" And when there was silence, the speaker said, "Well, on Veterans Day, you can still shake hands with a veteran." Your presence here is doing that. So what is a veteran? A veteran is as individual as the men you see around here. There are millions of stories, many of them never told. Some probably never will be told, can't be told. And sometimes they weigh us down in a way that we can each appreciate with one another, but it's hard to express to anybody else. It's sort of the camaraderie that is fused and put together in the crucible of combat. I just heard an account of an individual who had lived with his memories. They had burned him down for over 50 years. And finally it came to a point where he was able to put that behind him. And that's no small thing. We veterans share a lot of memories. I had to think as the various cadences were called in a booming sergeant's voice. That sergeant's voice wasn't always as welcome as should have been probably at 4 o'clock in the morning when they threw various pieces of equipment down the middle of the barracks to wake us up, or when they put us through our paces, knowing full well, they did certainly, that what they were teaching us were going to be life lessons that we needed to know for what was ahead of us. I don't know that we all got that point until we made it into combat. So what is a veteran? It's much more than that. Many of us, I would say most of us, were drafted. At that point, and when I first heard this, I thought, is that really how it was? We were asked to write a blank check to our country for everything up to and including our life. That's pretty much the way it was. For myself, I was married in 1965 in July. I was drafted in February of 66. I joined the 9th Division as a medic in July of 66. And we were preparing to go to Vietnam. We welcomed our first child in Kansas at Fort Riley in November of 66, and then I left for Vietnam in January of 67 via train and boat, and I was a combat medic, as you've already heard. I was Doc. Any of you who have served, any of you who have perhaps been a medic, you know that you are immediately and permanently assigned the name of Doc, and that will, by the way, stay with you the rest of your life. My duties were with 40 men. I didn't know those guys when I was thrown together with them just before we went on the boat to Vietnam, but believe me, I got to know them, and they got to know me. And almost 50 years later, the bonds that were formed there remain very, very special. As we heard, the conflict that I was in, the war in Vietnam, there were 58,000 who perished. 39,000 of those were under the age of 22. Usually I'm in a high school situation when I'm talking, but do we have anybody here between the ages of 18 and 24? Anybody? Right there? Okay. Well, normally I get half the senior class to stand up, and they're all young and strong and vibrant, not gray-haired grandpas like me. And when we remember as veterans what we did and what we said and where we were and what we shared, we remember ourselves as somewhere between the ages of 18 and 24. And 33,000 of the names on the Vietnam Wall were in fact 18 years old when they left this earth. So what is a veteran? We talk about statistics, and we talk about facts, and we talk about personalities, but there's more to it than that. I came from Wayne County, Ohio, just down the road a little bit, and Swiss-German heritage all the way. Everybody basically that I knew was just like me. And I get to Fort Riley, and I find that we've got blacks and whites in our unit. We've got Jews and Gentiles. We've got Italians and Polish and Native Americans, all for the betterment of each other. We learned so much. We learned that it is absolutely, positively necessary to get along. And we did. And we shared jokes and we shared stories, as well as the combat experience. Some of the best times that I have to this day are the reunions that I have with the guys from Charlie Company, as well as my fellow medics with whom I meet about once a year. And there were lots of us. This draft was pretty much all-encompassing. In the month of May of 1966, there were 42,000 men drafted. 2,600 of them ended up at Fort Riley, Kansas, and from that 2,600 men, they basically created the 2nd Brigade of the 9th Infantry Division, which is the unit that I ultimately served with. We shared close quarters there, especially on the boat. I look back and I see pictures of the accommodations that we had, and I wonder how I don't think I could sleep in those conditions at the tender age of 69, but fortunately I was only 22 at the time. We shared anxiety of what was coming. We shared loneliness, and it shaped us, as did, as I mentioned before, the crucible of combat. And our numbers are less now. The numbers of men and women entering the service are less. And I believe, as every veteran, I could say with Winston Churchill that as far as our country goes, never has so much been owed by so many to so few. Those men and women who are out there protecting us even at this time and hour. I believe as a veteran, I share with you, my fellow veterans, and all the support folks here, an understanding of the traumatic stresses that these individuals are going through. And I think for my own self, and I believe I share it with you, we rarely had time to process our grief. We rarely had time to grieve properly as you were. And we can look at the men and women in uniform today, and we have a respect for them that is not often accorded, a support that is often denied, and love and prayers that are often woefully lacking. For the veteran, as we come to a place like this today, and remember Veterans Day, surrounded as we are by these monuments, we recognize in a very special way that every one of those and every name etched there or on some memorial somewhere is a person. Perhaps we knew those people. Perhaps we served with them. We laughed with them. Perhaps we cried with them. Whatever. They're not just rows of stones, are they? Recently, I uncovered in a project at our home a box of letters that I wrote to my wife while I was in Vietnam. I must say that my memory was blurred by that time. And reading those lines, there was a clarity, a light put on things. And I had to say to myself, was that really me? Did I really do that? Did I really say that? So I'm glad for the memory that I have. I'm glad for the opportunities that I have to spend time with those that I served with. And I appreciate days like this. Now, isn't that great? Here we go, we're getting warmed up. The handshake that I spoke about in the beginning, you're giving that. You're giving us respect and recognition by being here, however brief and fleeting that might be. Your presence today is in itself a handshake and a pat on the back and an affirmation that what we were called to do and what we did was worth it, so that we can, with you all, enjoy freedom, which we all know is certainly not free. In France in 1415, Shakespeare put a lot of words in the mouth of a lot of people as they prepared for the Battle of Agincourt. And some of those words are somewhat familiar. You may remember them as I speak them. But they were said by King Henry V, encouraging the English force, which was heavily outnumbered by the French. And what he said as he encouraged his men was rather long, and I'll quote just a bit of it, where he said, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he who sheds his blood with me this day shall be my brother. We talk about things like that. We talk about closeness like that, and it is indeed shared in many respects only by a band of brothers. My fellow veterans, I salute you. I thank you. I count myself blessed to be in your presence today, to be one of your number. And everyone here, thank you. May God bless you. I appreciate your being here.